Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm tickled pink to introduce you to Annabel Monaghan. Annabel is the author of two young adult novels, A Girl Named Digit, optioned by the Disney Channel, and the sequel, Double Digit. She's also the author of Does This Volvo Make My Butt Look Big?, a selection of laugh-out-loud columns that appeared in the Huffington Post, The Week, and the Rye Record. She joins me today to talk about Nora Goes Off Script, which is her adult debut novel. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Annabel.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Annabel, I'm happy to have you here, and I can't wait to dig into your story. But I'm going to start by asking you the question I ask everybody, which is, Annabel, where does your story as a writer begin?
I don't want to take you back half a century, but I've wanted to be a writer since I could read. I always wanted to be a writer. When I was a little kid, I would make up stories, sort of how I made sense of the world. And I was a good English student in high school, and I chose a university because it had a really good English program. And I was, on the path to making my dreams come true. And when I was a senior in college, I noticed that all of my friends were moving to New York City. And then I thought, you can't get somebody to hire you to be a novelist. Like if I move to New York City, I won't have food or shelter.
Right.
And that's when, that's almost like the first step in becoming an adult, when you realize that not everybody walks onto an NBA basketball team. So I went and got a job in investment banking. And I worked on Wall Street for a couple of years. And my plan was that I was going to be a banker by day and a writer by night, which was a ridiculous plan also. So I was just working all the time. And then it was sort of interesting. So I went to business school and I got an MBA in finance. And then I went back and worked in banking and really relinquished my childhood dream, because come on, that was a ridiculous thing. And, you got to have a 401k. So it wasn't until I was 37 years old and I was at home with 3 children that I actually started writing again. So I am the late start story.
I hear all types of stories, but the commonalities really are this drive from a young age, like having a love of reading from a young age and kind of being mystified by authors or excited by authors. Do you remember when you were young, what you were excited by to read, what you were reading back in those days?
Yeah, I remember reading Heartburn. I remember reading women's stories that I thought were told in a way that was so clever. I would reread. I wasn't reading for the story. I was reading for the paragraph. God, that's a great paragraph. I want to reread this. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, just with regard to my own children. I think that when everybody's 9 years old, they know what they're going to be, what they should be when they grow up. And then something happens to us. We go off track, but it's if you could get back to who you were when you were 9 years old, that's what you should be doing when you're 50.
Wow, that's an interesting thing to think about. I spent last week at a retreat trying to get in touch with my inner child, and I'm trying to think what I wanted to be when I was 9 years old. It was probably an airline pilot. I think back then.
And look at what you're wearing on your head right now. You look like an airline pilot.
I'll tell you what, though, I took one flying lesson in Chatham, Massachusetts about 8 or 9 years ago. And I quickly realized probably would not have been the greatest airline pilot, because I was scared to death once they gave me the controls. I'm
then I think you take it a step further. What did that represent to you?
Oh, yes, probably escapism.
Yeah,
probably escapism. I wanted to get the hell out of Dodge, and yes, I do definitely escape through my novels. But so I'm trying to reconcile this notion of wanting to be a writer and then choosing a career in investment banking. because like the two to me, I mean, if you told me that you wanted to be a writer and then you got a job in advertising, I'd be like, okay, I could see the compromise there, or as a journalist. But investment banking is like a different animal. Did you have like a head for finance when you were in college?
Didn't, and I don't. I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
And I am uniquely able to be super interested in stuff that I'm bad at. Like,
Yeah.
I don't mind going out and trying to hit a tennis ball when I never hit the tennis ball. But it was interesting, and I wasn't good at it. But it was someplace where I could understand the path to the future. And there's something really terrifying about a creative life, because you could really not make it.
Oh, sure.
You really could have nothing to eat. And
Yeah.
that is not something that, that's not in my like psychological makeup to be comfortable with that. I'm not a risk taker. So it took me until I kind of felt comfortable in my life to take the risk to write.
Right. So tell me, so let's go back to when you said 37 years old,
Yep.
home with three kids. What sparked the thought to start writing?
So I never would have done it if it had not been for my friend Elizabeth Wolf, who I was just getting to know at the time. And she and I wrote this first book together. And it's called Click, the Girl's Guide to Knowing What You Want and Making It Happen. It's a very long title. I would avoid long titles for anyone listening. It was published by Simon & Schuster, and it was a guide to positive thinking for teenage girls. And we were in no way qualified to write this book, but we were talking about it. We were talking about, changing your attitude. And Elizabeth said, God, don't you wish you knew this when you were 15? And I thought, yes, I do. And then I ended the conversation, and she kept thinking about it. And she was very persistent. She said, let's write a book. Like, she doesn't have any of these kind of fears that I have. And so at her insistence, we sat down and wrote a book. I never would have written that book if I hadn't done it with someone else.
Yeah. What was your process? I mean, so writing your first book is hard. Writing a first book with somebody else where you have to collaborate and kind of align on, I imagine had its challenges, but what was your process for writing that?
It was bizarre. I mean, I think I may have blacked out in the middle. People say that they can't tell who wrote what, that maybe we had the same kind of voice in the book. But I'd write a piece, she'd write a piece. There was a section in the back that was a workbook, and she'd work on that when I worked on some of the stuff in the beginning. And it just went back and forth until it came together. I mean, our poor editor, I can't even imagine. I really admire people who are lifelong writing companions, because you really have to share a mind to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like being a songwriter. It's like, being in, a band where bands write songs together, like the Eagles or something. And, that's great because you get great music, you get different perspectives, but there's also like a lot of tension in those situations too. Did you feel that or no?
Not so much the tension, but just the, you can't keep, like when I'm writing fiction, and I actually prefer to write fiction. I have a whole story in my head that I'm trying to get out. And the more I talk about it with other people, the more that story sort of gets interrupted or poisoned. So I don't talk about it. But if you're collaborating with somebody, you have to be talking about what you're writing all the time. And you also have to have a plan. So yeah. I found that very challenging because I don't actually write with a plan.
So what was the process getting that published? So you two collaborate on it. Did you find an agent? I mean, obviously you must have, because it was published by a big house, but what was that learning experience like?
Yeah, my best advice to everybody is be lucky. That's job one. We sent it out to a bunch of agents, and it occurred to me while we were sending it out to a bunch of agents that my 15-year-old niece was doing a summer internship for a literary agent in Los Angeles. And so I said to my 15-year-old niece, you want to hand her this? And so she got her the pitch, and she immediately said yes. And
no kidding.
I mean, that is just, come on. Like children helping. Can you imagine?
I love it though. I mean, because what that tells me is not only does your niece have a tremendous amount of influence, but but that there was a real need for this. Like if an agent sees it from two, I assume your writing companion was unknown at the time as well, right?
Yep. Yep.
All right. So two unknown authors, with an idea, no credibility whatsoever, except for the fact that you were once, teenage girls.
That was it.
That was it, right?
I don't even have a daughter. So,
but there must have been a need. So she must have seen like an unmet need and realized, hey, I've got gold in my hands.
Yeah, no one was more shocked than I was.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then you kind of pivot from there, going into writing fiction, which I know you mentioned you prefer.
Yep. I always wanted to write a novel, says everyone. And I, luckily, because of this project, I already had an agent. So I came up with a draft of that and sent that to her. So that was sort of my entree to that, is because I had an agent already.
Right. And is that a girl named Digit?
A girl named Digit.
Yeah. So that was your first time writing something completely solo, it sounds like.
Yes. It was very fun to write.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself during the writing process?
That's a great question. It was fun to go back to that time. She's 17 years old. And I learned that when you are writing fiction, you are writing an autobiography. Like no matter what you're writing, so much of yourself and your life seeps into that story. And I was trying to write a story about a teenage math genius. And let me just tell you, one thing that I am not is a math genius. I never was. But so much of my perspective, and I sort of revisited my whole high school experience, feeling like a little bit of an outsider in the in crowd. And I just realized that I had an ability to share that. Like it's not easy to take that step. If you write a story, you've made yourself very vulnerable. So I was happy to know that I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing. A few things that I hear often, and just have experienced myself. If you really want to make it as a writer, as an author, you've got to be persistent. Number one.
Yep.
I'm going to add lucky to the list because you mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
But you also have to make yourself vulnerable because, even if you're writing fiction, I think especially if you're writing fiction, you are putting yourself, a little bit of your spirit and your soul into these characters. And to make them real, you have to make them identifiable for other people. And one way to do that is to, try to create them and craft them with empathy. But you're making yourself vulnerable because, again, you're opening yourself up a little bit. And I know just from, the novels that I've written, there are definitely pieces of me in each of these characters. Now, there are pieces of me that are, not pieces of me, but there are parts of these characters that are completely fabricated, I haven't done half I haven't murdered anybody, for example.
It's early yet. Let's see.
It's a relief to know that, probably. And yes, you're right. It is early. It is early. But
and I think you need to get to a certain part of your own personal development where you're ready to say, yeah, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And I sometimes will read a novel and I'll think that was such a great story, but I wish the author had gone there. You can feel when people are playing it safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the brave thing to do is just, bleed on the page.
Right. Well, that also, you're starting your writing, at 37, and, you've had a lot of life experience, up to that point, a lot of different types of experiences, careers, family, et cetera. And I imagine that's important too, to have a life that you have lived, that you can reflect on and lean into as you write.
Yeah. I honestly, when I was 30, I could not have written anything that I've written. I didn't know, I didn't have a perspective at that point. I was just sort of, juggling my life. And so I don't regret, not having started earlier. I don't think I could have done it.
Yeah.
You bloom when you bloom.
Exactly. That's a good perspective to have. And you can't force it, right? You can't force the words and the stories out of you.
Nope.
It kind of has to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stories, let's talk about Nora Goes Off Script, because I'm fascinated by the premise of this. Tell me, what can you share with me about Nora Goes Off Script?
So it is the story of Nora Hamilton, who is a made-for-TV romance writer. So think the Hallmark Channel. And her husband leaves her, and she writes a more serious screenplay about her divorce just to get it off her chest. And that is picked up as a feature film. And they film part of it on location at her home. And she ends up falling in love with the man who plays her husband in the movie.
So I definitely feel some Hallmark vibes coming here, right?
All the vibes.
All the Hallmark vibes. And as I told you before we started recording, I'm a sucker for a good Hallmark movie.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were going to admit it again, but okay.
Oh no, I'll admit it, and my audience knows. My audience knows what they have, at the helm of this operation. I could tell you, Fallen Angel, my favorite Christmas one with Gary Sinise.
Let's go.
They're all. I mean, and I tend to watch more of the Christmas ones, the Valentine's ones. Sure, they're good. The one with Betty White, but the Lost Valentine, I think it was. I mean, I'll tear up at the end of these. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Oh yeah, good.
And I even started to write one at one point because I wanted it to be but it was more of a parody. It was like a parody of like a Hallmark movie where you're using the same tropes, but in slightly different ways.
I would love to read that.
Oh yes. Well, that one's we'll call that a work in progress. It's called Karen Hates Christmas.
I like it.
Yeah, it's a little different. I don't think Hallmark would pick it up. Let's just say I think it would have to be like Lifetime because they do their own version of the those types of stories. But what fascinates you about those types of movies, the Hallmark movies?
What fascinates, first of all, I love them. And then I want to not love them because I want to think I'm better than that. And I am not better than that. And it turns out my husband is also not better than that. He'll just sit down, an hour into one, he'll sit down and watch the whole rest of it. What fascinates me, of course, is that it's the same movie over and over again.
Yeah.
It is scientifically designed to climax right before the last commercial break. I mean, I find it fascinating. And what I started thinking about when I was watching a bunch of these is who was writing these movies? Was it some very romantic kind of person who just, loved all these love stories and these almost kisses? Or was it something that was happening on a corporate level where you just had, conference room where people were, throwing in the elements and coming up with a movie? So I started thinking about Nora. And I thought it would be interesting to have a romance channel screenwriter who's never been in love. So she just does this so she can feed her children and she can support her deadbeat husband. And I thought it would be fun to take a person like that and just run her through like a real romance and see how she reacted and how that sort of compared to what she was writing.
Interesting. So she wasn't in love with her husband. She'd never real romance with him. Okay.
Nope.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder why she married the guy.
Well, she married him, it kind of all comes out in the book, but there's a kind of guy who has so much confidence and he shines that confidence on you that you think, I'm so lucky that he likes me. I must be in love with him too. It's a little bit of a narcissistic personality, but it sucks you in. And then that person becomes tired of you and it's not real love. So she had no sort of give and take with her husband. She did all the giving. And so once she meets somebody who really wants to hear what she has to say, who's interested in how she operates her life, she falls for him in a very hard way.
Interesting. Now I know I can't ask you too many questions about the story. I'll ask you this one. You can tell me if you can answer it or not. All right. Is he available at the time? Is he attainable?
Well, he's the former sexiest man alive. So some might say he's not attainable, but he's single.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, was there anyone else at home that, was, any other reasons why he couldn't?
No, he doesn't have anything at home. Everyone around him works for him.
Interesting.
So he just really loves being at her home.
Yeah.
I can't believe she knows how to roast a chicken. It's just like she's a very simple, very practical person. And that's part of the attraction. She's a person who's really engaged in her life.
Yeah. Yeah. When usually with these Hallmark type movies, Somebody's single, but they're usually single because, it's usually someone died, right? Someone's they're like widowed or a widower or something like that.
So much death.
Yes, lots
Very
of death.
clean. It's a clean way to get rid of
It's
somebody.
it's clean. It's
Yeah.
clean, and it's in some ways it's not kind of real life because it's very rare that somebody went through a messy divorce or something like that. It's usually something a little bit nicer. But you
Like
chose
death.
death. Yeah, death
Yeah.
can be nice, but it's like, I guess there's less of a tension in death because that's out of the character. Well, I guess everything's out of the character's control, but you chose to have her kind of going through a divorce, which I think is like the big D word. I think is something that usually these channels kind of avoid a little bit. I know Hallmark does because of kind of more of like a spiritual faith-based background that that kind of runs that channel, but
that's the whole point of this book.
Yeah.
Is that true love is true love, but it's a lot messier than what you can fit into a 120-minute made-for-television movie. It's people. What surprised me in writing this book is just how much baggage 2 40-year-olds bring into a relationship. You don't just like go out and eat a steak. You've got your children at home. You've got your parents you're taking care of. You bring a lot of stuff into it, and it's no longer just the two of you falling in love.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I'm curious if you get bothered by this like I do when you're watching, let's say, the Christmas ones, because those are the ones that I'm more attuned to. You ever notice how like everyone's dressed in obviously like winter clothes, but the scenery in the background is clear that it's like either spring or summer?
It's absolutely not cold outside. Like you can tell on people's faces that it's cold outside. It's 80 degrees where they're filming, and they're all in their red and green coats. Also of note of these Christmas movies, they have a different coat in every scene. Who owns 30 winter coats? Especially because they're making a living, as cupcake salespeople. Like, where are they getting all this money?
There's not a lot of margin in cupcakes.
No, there's one Christmas movie. Tell me if you've seen this one. She is a custom wreath designer.
Mm-hmm.
She only works in December.
Yeah.
Like, how many custom wreaths do you sell?
Right. And do you sell them like $1,000 a pop? Because that's the only way to it's nuts. But I worry that they're going to have heat stroke. Like, I feel for the actors. I'm like, hopefully there's like some trailer with like a cooling fan somewhere,
right.
Like they do at football games, where they have like the big air conditioners on people. Like it scares me. Honestly, it scares me.
I think you've ruined those Christmas movies for a lot of people now.
If that aspect is what ruins the movie for them, then maybe I'm doing them a service. I don't know. The implausible storylines.
Yeah.
But I love them. I mean,
I love them.
I love them. And you're right. They recycle the same movie over and over. I mean, I've seen 4 different versions of the one or the story where, somebody switches apartments, does like an apartment swap, one goes to the big city, the other goes to the small town. Someone falls in love with somebody's sister.
Yes.
Which is fine.
Yes. Sister. I like the princess ones too.
The princess ones are good.
Yeah.
They're good. But I digress. In the spirit of getting to know more about you as a person, Annabel, I'd love to know what were some of your favorite TV shows when you were growing up?
Well, I liked all the things that everybody watched, Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. I'm 52. But I also liked some dark stuff like Quincy, Medical Examiner, and the Rockford Files.
I was watching the Rockford Files last night.
Were you really?
I was really, it wasn't by choice. My wife had it on. And I love the theme song.
Yes,
that little keyboard synthesizer in the beginning. It was a show my grandfather used to watch. He used to watch that in Quincy. He was a doctor, so he loved all the medical stuff. But the Rockford Files was great.
Yeah, and Columbo. I mean, I will say that of my lifetime, my favorite viewing experience is Columbo. I could just settle into that and for a week.
I've seen everyone 5 times. Even the crappy ones in the late 80s to the early 90s when
they did get crappy later. They did.
Oh man, it was bad. Do you have a favorite Columbo episode?
I do.
Which one?
I like the one where the guy murders his friend by getting him to answer the phone and say.
I watched it last night. It's called Dial M for Murder. And
Yeah.
do you remember the
Rosebud?
Rosebud, because he was a big Citizen Kane fan. He had the sled on his door,
Oh.
on his wall.
It's the best. It's
Yeah.
the absolute best.
Oh no, and there's a very young Ed Begley Jr. in that episode.
Is that right?
Yep, he works at the animal control place wherever they're holding the two dogs. Or the dogs' names were Abbott and Costello or something like that, right?
Wow.
No, I literally watched it the other night. I love Columbo. I love Columbo. He's the best.
He's the best. Oh,
Oh
God.
My favorite, I have a few, but there's one called Murder Under Glass, which was directed by Jonathan Demme, who did Silence of the Lambs, The Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. And it's with Louis Jourdan. He's the bad guy. And it's the one where, I don't know if you're as familiar with The Godfather Part 2 as I am, but
no.
But Frankie Five Angels is the guy who gets killed. That was his character name in Godfather 2. And Columbo has to speak Italian to this guy's nephew. And it is clear as day. I mean, I grew up, my grandmother was 100% Italian. He's speaking gibberish. He's not speaking Italian. He's saying basta, basta.
I don't think I've seen this one.
Oh no, it is great. And it's probably one of the better episodes. So that would be Murder Under Glass.
Okay.
And it's awesome. It's awesome.
They're all on Netflix.
Yes. Yeah. And so I spend my nights watching Columbo.
That is so fun.
Well, there you go. There we have it. How about this? Do you have a favorite Hallmark movie or one of your favorite Hallmark movies that you can mention?
No, I don't. I like them all equally. I like the Christmas ones where we fall in love and we discover the true meaning of Christmas.
Of course.
Which is falling in love, it seems. Yes, no, I like them all equally.
All right. There you go. Easy answer, safe answer.
Yep.
I'm gonna go with, not that you asked me.
I'd like to know.
Now I'm not gonna remember the name of it. It's the one where the soldier gets a card from a young woman in a small town. Her dad is played by Ed Asner. And he's got to bring home like a dog tag to somebody because somebody in his unit was killed in Afghanistan. So he comes home. No, he comes to this town, and he falls in love with the woman. He saves her dad from getting hit by a car. He saves Ed Asner's life. And so now it's Ed Asner's job to get her hooked up with this guy because the guy she's dating he's a big loser. And I wish I could remember the name of the movie. Hopefully before the end of this one, I will.
This sounds like a knockoff of a Ashton Kutcher movie. Is it Ashton Kutcher? He goes.
No. It's not Ashton Kutcher.
Also cute.
Oh yeah.
Oh, is it the guy from High School Musical?
No. It's nobody's. I wish my wife were here because she'd tell me what it was. But I'll think about it before the end of our time together.
All right.
So there you go. But that is my favorite one. All right. So question number 3 then. In what ways, if any? No, don't be scared. No one's left crying one of these interviews yet. Although there is still time, just like I could still murder somebody. In what ways, if any, have you found writing to be therapeutic for you?
Oh, in what ways? In all the ways.
In all the ways. Well, tell me more.
All the way. I mean, I would be in a straitjacket. I think my entire life, I process everything that happens through connecting it to something that's already happened or something that's going to happen or turning it into a story. And I have a lot of things that rattle around in my mind. And until I actually sit down, open my laptop and write about them, I write a column every other week. And that's generally what that is just getting out whatever the thing is that's rattling around in my mind. I think that it has helped me to see people more in the gray area. Mm-hmm. I think that writing has made it easy for me to give up judgment. Every villain has some great characteristic. I think it's a very healthy way for me to process my life. my worries, and everything that's going on around me.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I've been in and out of therapy situations, working with therapists, and just kind of trying to find, more out about myself. And it's probably no coincidence that so many exercises that therapists give you or coaches give you are writing based, journaling, writing based, kind of getting in touch with kind of who you are, because there is that introspective element to writing, I think is critically important. And it does help you understand a bit about who you are.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even in this book, Nora Goes Off Script, her 10-year-old son is coping with divorce and abandonment and worry about what's going to happen to his family. I'm not kidding. I wrote this entire book, sold it. It was printing. And then I thought, oh God, that's what happened to me when I was 10. I mean, it honestly wasn't until I'd written the story that I realized how much of my own experience I moved through by writing it.
Did your parents divorce when you were 10?
They divorced when I was 5.
Okay.
But my dad moved to England when I was 10. And that was just really difficult for me.
Wow. So
but I had no idea I was writing that story.
Yeah, no, but that's cool that you kind of put those pieces together. Like in hindsight, retrospect, I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah.
I'm not good with words sometimes.
This podcast isn't about that anyways.
No, it's not. It's not.
No.
All right. So I have the answer to the question.
Oh.
And here it is. Does this look familiar to you at all? The Christmas card. How
have I not seen this?
Yes, two strangers brought together by words of love.
I'm sold. I may watch this today.
That could be your homework.
Okay, thank you.
Could be your homework to watch the Christmas card. All right, now the questions get a little bit more tricky. So here we go. How do you feel when you're staring at a blank sheet of paper or a blank computer screen and you've got to write something, but what's in front of you is blank? Any emotions you experience?
I do feel the normal panic that anyone would feel. But I do not do well in a panic kind of a situation. So if I'm writing my column, I say to myself, you don't have to write this. You could just tell them you don't have anything. And that sort of frees me up. If I'm starting a book, I will think, no one's ever going to read this anyways. Why don't you just start? I don't ever sit down to, write something brilliant. I mean, that's to me such a non-starter. So I just sit down to write a little bit of something, add a little bit of something to it. And I try to feel as loose and not terrified as I can, because I think that panic feeling, which I do get, is something you got to talk yourself out of immediately.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I would imagine the pressure that sitting down in front of the keyboard, thinking to yourself, I have to write something. I have to write a bestseller.
I mean, come on.
Would just put so much weight on your shoulders.
It would. And for me, my best writing is when I'm feeling casual. So if I start trying to act smart, I don't know a lot of big words. I'm not going to give you a lot of big words. If I try to act like that kind of person, oh, look, I'm Margaret Atwood now. That's not who I am. So I can only tell the kind of story I can tell.
Right. And that, you can't step into another persona, you have to be you.
Yeah.
Or else it won't come across as authentic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that readers pick up on that.
Yeah, totally.
Being false.
Yep. How about lessons about publishing that you may have learned the hard way? So maybe thinking back to, those first, the first books. Because I know the learning curve is very steep, but can you think about anything that you were surprised about during the process, or that you felt you learned the hard way?
It's just that all publishing experiences are not going to be equal. And sometimes I think that my first 3 books were published this is fun, let's publish these books, but I don't feel like my publisher was really that enthusiastic about it. There wasn't a lot of support or certainly advertisement or promotion or any of that stuff. And that sort of fell on me, which I realized too late, and I didn't really do it. Oops. And then this project, Nora, Putnam has just been really enthusiastic and supportive. It's a totally different experience. Like they're calling you and asking you to have me on your podcast. So I think, when authors have a book out on submission and there's interest from different publishing houses, it's not the question you need to, I don't know if you can ask it or just sort of figure it out, is how enthusiastic are they about my book? Because if your publisher is enthusiastic about your book, they're going to do a ton to support you. And this experience has just been, it's like they're throwing me a birthday party all the time. It's been amazing. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's refreshing to hear, because so often, I hear from people who say, what, my publisher, they're doing some things for me, but I'm doing the bulk of it, right? I'm doing the bulk of the promotion, the advertising, the reaching out to, bookstores and things like that. But it seems like that you have a really good, enthusiastic publicity group.
Well, I'm super grateful for them. But, it's also a business. Like when I was publishing A Girl Named Digit, they were also publishing Lois Lowry's, maybe it was The Giver. Like this is the biggest book that ever came out. So in a world of finite publicity dollars, like you're not going to give it to A Girl Named Digit, for God's sakes. So that's what you have to remember. It's not personal. It's not like, oh, my editor doesn't like me anymore. They're making a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. All right, two more, then we wrap. How do you feed your inner child, Annabel?
I love that. The first thing I thought of when you asked that is I have a great niece whose name happens to be Annabel. And when I see her, I feel that my inner child is just like, I'm crawling around on hands and knees and pretending like we have popsicles and being with little children, I think is a wonderful way to feed your inner child. I also like to go through the woods. When I'm in the woods, I feel like I'm connected to that 9-year-old version of myself, who, by the way, was never in the woods when I was 9 years old. But yes, I like to be outside.
Yeah. What is it about being outside that helps you connect to your younger self, even though that, 9-year-old Annabelle wasn't, really exploring the woods all that much?
I think that your inner child, I think, is your real self. That's how I see myself. Like I am a bunch of nonsense piled on that 9-year-old child. And like my job is to get back to being that 9-year-old child. And when I'm in the woods, particularly if I'm alone in the woods, it is so quiet, except for the sounds of the birds and the rustling of the leaves. And not too quiet, because there are those sounds, but I can finally hear myself think. And there aren't even cars going by. So I think I connect that way.
Very cool. Very cool. So now let's think about that 9-year-old child again.
Oh,
and if you could, I know these get deep.
Should I lie down?
Yes, please. Whatever makes you comfortable, lie down.
Thank you.
I can turn on the white noise machine so no one else can hear us.
Yes. We're almost out of time.
But thinking about that 9-year-old child, if you could whisper some words of advice into her ear, what would you tell her? What would you tell that 9-year-old child?
Oh, I would say, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Just keep going. It's all, it's not going to work out right away, but it's going to be okay. And I just remember being, not even 9 and then a teenager and thinking, am I ever going to make anything of myself? And now from where I'm sitting, it's such a stupid question anyways. Like, what does that even mean to make anything of yourself? I'm a friend, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm connected to people. So of course I've made something of myself.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Good advice to end on. The book, of course, is Nora Goes Off Script. The author is Annabel Monaghan. Sorry, I just butchered your last name. Annabel, do you have a website, social media, anything you want to throw out there for people who want to connect with you?
I do. I'm at annabelmonaghan.com. It's my website. And then I'm Annabel Monaghan at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
All right.
There's a G in Monaghan.
There was a G in Mon. That's right. It's one of those
Yes.
names that, sounds, I have Monahans in our extended family. So
Do they have a G?
They do have a G. They do
Interesting.
have a G. Yes. From Massachusetts through marriage. So, I'm sure we're not blood related, but
Well, I'm not a Monaghan anyways. This is my married name. Do I look Irish to you?
Well, Well, you never can tell.
Yeah, you can.
With the webcam lighting, I wouldn't want to, maybe English somehow. I don't know. Welsh? No, I don't know. I'm bad at that.
Spanish.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't look Italian, but it's what I'm mostly. It's what I identify as too.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, this has been a fun conversation, Annabel. Thank you so much.
Fun. Thank you. I forgot we were doing this. I just thought we were shooting the breeze.
There you go. That's the goal.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.